I am ready.
Okay. All right. Hi, Amber. Thank you so much, number one, for your service. And number two, thank you for letting us review your resume. We're really excited to go through it. So, again, we're going to repeat what we did for the previous resume. Jared's going to speak into the resume first, and then I'm going to touch a little bit more on how to transition from your previous career into Salesforce. So, Jared, go ahead and take it away.
Absolutely. So, something that Megan and I had just kind of spoken offline about was that you actually get the chance to review our first video. So you obviously took some of the things that we had originally mentioned and then put them into your resume build. So fantastic job kind of designing this and creating a hierarchy and a structure there. I do like the way that you did put your hyperlinks in there as well. So it links right to your email as well as your LinkedIn. What I do want to mention, and this is something that we probably should, I think, clarify at some point, and that's whether or not you can save this via Word document rather than Google. So the problem with Google Documents is that sometimes the things that we are able to create on Word don't transition well over into Google Docs, and vice versa, right? So what happens is there are a lot of things that stay consistent in certain areas, like your header up here. Throughout the entire resume, you do have that header above every page, which is absolutely fine, but the consistency does create some of a problem in spacing when it comes to the actual page and length of certain areas. So one that does increase your page size. So keeping it maybe to one of your like your very first page as more of like your overarching header would probably be best. But in the same vein, like we were saying, transitioning over from different platforms when we're actually building these resumes can actually change the way that the resume is designed. And it can go over differently based on who's viewing it, right? So if you were to have made this in Word and then it transitioned over to Google Docs to who is reviewing your resume when you're applying to jobs, they would have seen probably a vastly different resume than you actually built. And that's where we are kind of running into some spacing errors in these areas, which probably aren't errors on your end as much as they're errors in transition. But at the same time, there's things that somebody who is judging your resume for the first time is going to look at. So if you can just kind of scroll down a little bit for me. So we did get the summary in there. We got the core competencies as well. Can you go back up? Okay, so I think something that you might be able to benefit from here is if you were to actually take core competencies and switch that with summary, right? The core competency kind of leads into it. And that depends on, what you're gearing your resume towards, because you can actually add some of your Salesforce experience to your core competencies like most people would, right? And Megan will speak to that afterwards. But what tends to happen is that if you actually have a paragraph that falls into broken up sections, sometimes it becomes a little daunting to read. And that's just an area in, if we were to look back at Holly's resume, which you guys can kind of rewind to later, or during this period, you'll actually notice that it actually flows better because she has her bullet points first, and then it flows more into paragraph statements, which kind of is just easier on the eyes to read, at least in my opinion. And in a lot of people that I've spoken with in the past, I've also kind of felt that it's easier to look at things and kind of almost like warm up to it on the way in. So your summary is very nicely written. It's very well written. It's obviously no spelling errors or grammatical errors at all. I do like how you broke this section up. It actually saves on space without the bullet points when you actually break it up like that too, because you can actually have that flowing sentence almost type of structure to it, but you're actually breaking up the sections individually. I've never personally seen community connections inside of a resume, but I do feel that usually your core competencies goes right into professional experience. So what I would suggest is possibly moving the community connections into either the lower portion of it as more of an extracurricular portion of your resume, as opposed to an entry into what you do and who you are. If you can continue to scroll just a little bit, stop right there. Let's see. So another thing that I am noticing is actually difficult. So it seems like you're a professional with a lot of experience. This is a very good example of somebody who has so much experience that it'd be difficult to have more of a space efficient resume. So that's why I transitioned into a 2-page as well, which is something that can probably go with just trying to either make some of these sentences a little shorter or playing with the font. What's the font size? This is a 12. Okay, so up 11. Okay, so yeah, making it any smaller than that's going to be difficult to read and make things a little more complicated. It's actually going to make things look more like a dictionary, which is what you don't want to turn into. But what we could do is we can actually go ahead and take some of these sentences and kind of even try to make them into full sentences instead of breaking off into different semicolons in certain areas, right? And that transitions well. So if you can kind of keep going, standardized procedures. I like how she breaks up her experience into specific categories in there. But what I'm noticing is that when you explain those areas, it's actually adding a whole lot of experience and taking away from your ability to speak to those later. So a resume is almost like a foreshadow or a cliffhanger in a sense, right? If you think about it, right? You want to give just enough information to know that there is something that's going to come back later that's going to rear its head and discuss and speak about. However, if you put too much into it, you kind of take away from your ability to speak to those areas. And that's something that you really want to have because it showcases and it allows you to really show that you have experience in speaking and you have a strong ability to communicate. So maybe taking some of these and kind of shortening them, these bullet points, and bringing them in a little bit, and then adding sections in your mind or mental notes that say, okay, let's go back to this later. So when I am speaking about my experience at Benchmark environment as a talent acquisition and recruiter, and you can talk about your candidate sourcing, and you can probably bring these sections these categories and actually break them down a little bit, and then speak to them later in your interview. Because they're going to ask specific questions and you're going to be able to speak to those. And an interview is pretty much kind of going ahead and selling yourself, right? You're telling them about, you as either as a contractor or a full-time placement, and you want to be able to communicate efficiently, that you can do the things they're looking for you to do, and how this experience transitions well into the role that you're interviewing for. But at the same time, it's also almost like a marketing tactic or an advertisement in a sense that's going to help you kind of structure your conversation and lead the flow, and then be able to speak to more in the future. Let's see, what else do we have? And then we have our very strong United States Air Force background. As Megan had mentioned, thank you so much for your service. And your background in Air Force is very, very, I'm sorry, can you go back up just a little bit? So you have a very long experience in the Air Force, and you were in operations and training, and you're a manager in that area as well. So that's something that is going to help transition very, very well into management conversations or executive leadership conversations. You've shown just in this section alone how much you can actually bring to the table in a structured and organized way. So this might be the section that you keep the most information on, because it sounds like it's very in-depth, and there's a lot of different categories that you do touch that, yes, you can speak to, but because it was over such a long span of time, this is probably the only section that I'd probably keep as similar to how it is as possible, just from the way that you have it structured and the amount of experience that you have in total. It's going to be difficult for you to make this a short resume, but at the same time, you might be able to just kind of take a dent into this. You have your education on the bottom, which is awesome. It's exactly how it's been historically in most cases. Is there any more to this, or is that's the bottom page? Okay, cool. And your education section it's perfect, and you do have your Salesforce experience in there, or your Salesforce education in there. Is there any way that, or any experience here that she has that she can kind of use feasibly to show that she can transition that into Salesforce?
Yeah, great question. So Amber, I really think that this section right here, the operations and training manager, having my husband also be Air Force, go Air Force. I truly believe that he's gotten a lot of the interviews and a lot of interest because of his managing experience. So I truly believe that your relationship building, your process improvement, especially, but also reporting champion, you have a lot of keywords in here that resonate with Salesforce. So I would really look into each of these sections. I love, love, love how you're bolding, like relationship building, workforce rebalancing, just everything that you focused on. I love that it's bolded, but I would truly use this section right here and convert it into more of Salesforce. Now, I would also say that recruiting, Jared and I both did recruiting, and we know quite well how it is to have a pipeline of people. So that at the end of the day is data. So right here, you had to reach 100 qualified veteran candidates. So you had to search for people, that's keywords. You had to lead them through the process. So that's if you're thinking of like Sales Cloud, you're leading somebody on a designated path to be able to sell something to them. So I would say right here, you're also using applicant tracking. So the same thing with Sales Cloud. A lot of these can still be used, but like Jared was saying, I would maybe put it down to like a sentence and using some words that you already had. I utilized a tracking system. And then, let's see. I would go back up. I would say when you're getting more up to the onboarding and training specialist, since a lot of the positions were kind of the same thing, I would just minimize, like Jared said, especially like for this section. I would go ahead and minimize that because I want to see now that you're transitioning from your military background, still that you were a great leader, you took responsibility, you were managing people, you were very hands-on and active. I want to see you translate that into Salesforce terms now. So kind of scrolling back up, I love how you have this section right here. You definitely watched our video, so we're really appreciative of that. Hope it helped. And then your summary, I want to see more of your military background and how that would make you really shine in the Salesforce industry. In terms of core competencies and community connections, I think this is great. I think you being active within the veteran community to be able to help others really move up in their life, I think you should leave that because, again, referring back to like Salesforce Ohana, that's what we are. That's what we do. We give back. So definitely make sure you're leaving that. But I would actually put we're going to scroll down. I would put like the Salesforce stuff, the Salesforce related content above right here. So really kind of going off of Holly's resume, when you start entering into Salesforce, you want to have your badges there. You want to have your certifications as you keep going. So now that Amber's transitioning, she was military, those skills still do apply, but now we're going to be focused more on Salesforce. So Amber, overall, really great. I think you would really benefit from just making the sentences a lot shorter where it's applicable. And then also keeping on to your management experience. And then again, lastly, like we said earlier, is just making those like reach 100 qualified veteran candidates. This will also help you when you're trying to determine what to say, understand Salesforce in that aspect too. So overall, really great job. Jared, I know you wanted to talk into this section right here, so I'll just hand it right back to you.
Oh, yes. So I think that realistically, the header design is something that a lot of professionals I've seen have done. And I know that I spoke about it briefly in the very beginning, but I think that what we should probably try to always do is kind of move away from the consistencies that usually happen between page to page work. And like that kind of translations back into Hamza's resume from prior, right? We had that long bar, right? And the reason why it stayed for so long was because it was being consistent with the page before. But if he was to have transitioned that to the above section, that would have actually, one, saved him space, and two, wouldn't have been something that was kind of just a design the entire way. And this is kind of the same thing, right? So I saw your name at the very beginning. I saw where you were from, and I see your contact information and your LinkedIn. But realistically, I think that it would probably, like I had said before, save you more space if you would have just kind of left it at the top. and kind of just have that be your entry. It's almost like your name tag when you walk into a room. What I also realized is that in your amount of your experience, right, there's a lot of areas where you tracked, there's a lot of areas where you dealt with systems, and there doesn't seem to be any technology specific skills that are in that even if you don't have right now hands-on Salesforce experience, those are types of things that are going to help you in the future identify more Salesforce roles, because people are going to say, wow, okay, so Salesforce CRM system and say NetSuite CRM, right? They're going to say, okay, those are very similar, while Salesforce obviously is more complex and more in depth, easier to work with in a lot of ways. It's still a CRM system, so this still has very sound and very similar fundamentals in how they're used and how they work. So especially with the talent acquisition and recruiting section, a lot of CRMs, I guess, work usually goes into those kinds of things unless you're using Excel as your base CRM system, right? So that's something that you probably could have leveraged at the very top of your resume in your core competencies. And then if we can kind of bring that back up, I think there's a lot of things here that kind of showcase. So yeah, she has Salesforce in the very beginning, which is awesome. That does help her. She should probably also, like you had mentioned, I wouldn't have moved the education section or the fact that she had been to Merivis. I would actually just kind of see what she does have right there, Merivis alumni. So I don't know if moving that from education would be helpful, but when she does get that badge, when she does get her certifications, it definitely should be very visible very early. So it's like, like, a light bulb, right? Because at the same time, if you're looking at the way that Salesforce is currently moving and the way that they're doing a lot of their marketing and the way that a lot of more people are getting into the industry, it's going to become a commodity skill as time expands and passes. So in the future, it's going to be, okay, who doesn't know Salesforce? Those people I can remove from the list of candidates, right? And it'll be actually then easier to find people who don't have Salesforce experience than people who do have Salesforce experience. So what you want to do is stand out as deeply as possible, right? Especially because it's a Salesforce specific role, right? There might be some roles that you get into in the future that may not be Salesforce specific, but have very Salesforce heavy needs to it. And those are things that you're going to want to really showcase then, because then it's like, okay, this is obviously somebody that we don't have to remove from the list. And this is somebody that we can continue to look at this resume and read through it and figure it out. I think what I'm having a hard time recognizing in, never mind.
Okay.
Never mind. I just saw it in the summary. And it seemed like a lot of your experience had to do with management. But I didn't see anything really about team skills. And then I saw passionate about team building, community engagement, and seeking an ideal career as a customer and employee success manager. So that already kind of showcases what you're going for. And that's something that's almost like an intro statement or an elevator pitch, right? But that's really it. I mean, I think it's well designed, and I think it does speak a lot about you, and it shows that you have a great deal of experience. So thanks again for letting us use your resume, and thanks again for your service.
Yeah. Amber, last thing I'll add in is don't forget to put your Trailblazer account at the top so we can find you. But again, thank you so much, Amber. We appreciate it. And let's go ahead and hop to the last resume, which is John.